We have already run our application and seen how we can enter data through our transactions. It would be very convenient to have a more general view of the information, not only to enter, modify, and delete countries, for example, but also to filter and order countries, to select a country and view its cities, and to see all of its information. What options do we have that will allow us to implement this functionality in a simple and quick way? We're going to use GeneXus patterns. These patterns will automatically implement all the objects we'll need in order to create this functionality, and thus we will avoid having to do it manually. We'll simply apply the pattern to the country transaction and we'll be able to manage the country information. This pattern will be work with countries. So let's open the country transaction. I'll go to the Knowledge Base Navigator and click on Country. And we see there are two tabs at the bottom of the screen that correspond to the patterns that are integrated in this transaction. We'll concentrate on the Work With pattern. Here we are seeing an instance of this pattern. The instance that will be applied to the country transaction if we indicate that we want the pattern applied. How do we get this pattern to be applied to the country transaction? All we have to do is click on this checkbox and we'll automatically have our Work With countries pattern implemented. Let's select this option and save our changes. And let's press F5 in order to run our application. Let's first take note of the fact that the link to our transaction country is not available anymore, but we do have a link to our Work With pattern, which is the Work With country. We'll click here and we see the information for each of these countries, the name, the flag, and the continent. We can search by setting a filter on the country name. So note that if I start typing a country name, Uruguay for example, I'll be positioned, the corresponding record will be displayed. If I delete that, then all the countries show again. This icon we have here will allow us to modify the record's information. This one will allow us to eliminate the record, and this icon here allows us to insert a new record. Where will these icons take us? To the country transaction, allowing us to enter a new country. We cancel, and if I select the option Update that's related to the record Brazil, it will take me to the transaction and I will be placed on the record corresponding to Brazil. I can make whatever modifications I want, and then I confirm the changes and return to the pattern. I'm going to cancel since I haven't made any modifications, and we'll return to this main page. Note that if I select the link that shows up on the country name, I'll be able to view all the information about the country in the tabs, both the general information as well as the information about the cities. We'll start by making a few changes. We aren't interested in seeing the flag or the identifier in this form. For every country, we only want to see its name and the region it belongs to. So let's go back to our KB and let's see what modifications we have to make to our instance in order to implement these changes. So let's take a look at this node, Attributes. This node by default shows us all the attributes of the first level of the transaction, those that correspond to the country. If we only want to see the name of the country and the world region on the user screen, we'll have to delete the attribute attribute corresponding to the flag, and hide the identifier. Why did we say hide the identifier and not delete it? Because country ID is our country transaction's primary key, and we will see that we won't be able to delete it. What we can do is hide it if we don't want it to be visible. To delete the country flag attribute, we just need to select it and hit the delete key. And in order to hide the country ID attribute, we'll have to edit its properties, and to do so, we press F4. We'll modify this property, visible, and set it to false. The country ID is still present within the structure, but it will not be visible. I save the changes, and we'll run the application again, hitting F5, in order to see what behavior has changed. We click here, and now we see that only the country name and the world region are present. Let's make a note of the order in which we are seeing the data. The data is ordered by country name, which is the default order the pattern is applying. Why is it ordering by country name? Because country name is what's called the descriptor attribute in this country transaction. It's the attribute that has the greatest meaning for the transaction. But we'll be able to add different orders if we want. So we'll create two new orders. One order for world region and another order for the pair world region and country name. So let's return to our KB and see what modifications we'll have to make in our instance of this pattern. We look at the node orders, and this node is showing us the default order that is being used to display the data that's been entered. We'll add two new orders. To do this, we position our pointer here, right-click, and select the option Add Order. If we press F4 and edit its properties, we'll be able to name this order. We'll call it World Region. And save our changes. And we'll define which attribute this order will be applied to. So we'll place our pointer here, right-click, Add Attribute, and we'll select the corresponding attribute. We save the changes, and we've defined the first order. To define another order, we'll follow a similar process. I add order, hit F4, and name it both. Then right-clicking, I add an attribute, and I select the attribute corresponding to world region, and then add another attribute corresponding to the country name. So now we've defined our two orders, and we save the changes. And now I press F5 to see our pattern in execution. We click here and we see our three filters. By name, which we already had, by world region, which gets ordered automatically, and by world region and country name, which we defined as both. We're going to make one more change. We'll filter our grid not only by country name, but also by world region. So in order to implement these changes, we'll concentrate on the filter node. This node, filter, contains two elements, attributes and conditions. The attribute it's showing us, country name, matches the default order we had in the beginning. If we look at these conditions, it's telling us that the grid should display the country record carrying the name that matches the contents of the variable. In other words, the content of the filter as long as the filter is not empty. You may recall that in the beginning, when running the application, as soon as we started to type the word Uruguay, we immediately were positioned on the record Uruguay. That's what this condition is defining here. If now we want to be able to filter by world region as well, we'll have to add that attribute here, and then define the corresponding condition so we'll be shown those countries that correspond to the indicated region. So we're going to add an attribute by right-clicking and selecting Add Filter Attribute. Hitting F4, we edit the properties and enter the name. We close this and save. And we'll also define the corresponding conditions. Placing our pointer here, I right-click, Add Condition, hitting F4, edit the properties, and click here to write what our conditions will be. So we've declared our conditions and we save the changes. And now we'll run it. So now we can see our new filters. If we select America, we can see our two countries ordered by name. If we select Europe, we can see the two European countries. So we know our filters are working. Let's return to our KB and take a look at a few modifications that the pattern made to our country transaction. When we execute the pattern, we can enter a new country, modify an existing country, or delete one. What was this insertion, modification, or delete option doing? It was opening the country transaction and placing us on a specific record in case we needed to modify it. Let's note what changes the pattern has made to our transaction rules. Besides the rules we already declared, the error message and no accept rules, the pattern has added these rules we have here. GeneXus uses the parm rule to declare parameters that it receives and returns. When we were modifying the country information, it was calling the transaction in update mode and passing the country identifier, country ID. That's why we said that we couldn't delete the country ID attribute from our grid. We were able to hide it but not delete it, since this attribute is needed because it will be passed as a parameter when calling the transactions. When we want to insert a record, the insert mode is sent along with an empty value for the second parameter. We're going to run our application once again in order to implement a change to our pattern. Note that if I select a country in order to modify it, for example in update mode, we make a change, and when we confirm that change, we are returning to our pattern, to our start page. When confirming a change, we might want to go to View Country, this option. To do this, we'll have to modify this instance's configuration. We return here, and we'll edit the properties of this pattern instance. Here we find the After Update property. We select the value Go to View. So now after modifying a record, we'll go to View Country. We save the changes and close the properties and run the application again. We go to Work with Country, select the Update option, then we make our changes, and when we confirm our changes, we go to View Country. So now we've seen how to apply and modify a pattern instance.